Thank you, Nicole, for that. Just a very important noticing of when we're talking about the soul and reconnection of how busy we are or how we are in the world and in our lives so deeply and so superficially at the same time. And how to keep remembering what it is to feel and to be present with all that we talk about and all the wonderful things that we do, that we don't fall unconscious in that moment. And it's a rude awakening when technology kind of interferes with everything one prepares. So my laptop crashed. I'm sorry about the personal information in this beautiful expanse, but it is real life. And I've been running around instead of preparing and settling in and doing that, trying to get a laptop up. And there are so many things missing, and I can't get my presentation up. So we're going to have to just be human in this presentation. And I might have to draw on slides that, who knows, will just speak to this moment or not. So I also had a conversation to give a little bit of scope. Dumi has worked with me for a very long time, and it has been a wonderful journey of teacher, student, teacher, moving into shifting the roles and having this shared kind of space of trying to see, not even figure out, but who is the teacher and who is the student at whatever place we are meeting each other. And bringing Nicole in, we're part of the Wisdom School in McGregor. And that is a place of accessing spiritual wisdom, but also the local wisdom, the wisdom of the soul, the wisdom of the soil, and the wisdom of the people to work with integration. So Nicole fits in from that perspective, and she can speak of herself and about her line. And Dumi has a line that he can talk about as well of ancestry. I have spoken to this community about the connection here of the Irish line and having the place of being in South Africa and on this African soil. So it's been very important for me from an Integral African Institute and to use the coaching in our coaching way. There was a question for me of not leaving the learning and development space and coming into becoming an analyst and a psychoanalyst and working with the developmental nature of human beings, right from infant observation into working with children and adolescents, working with family systems, to then training in group relationships and organizational systems and bringing in that wealth of multidisciplinary teams who can deal with the health and wellness of our systems and processes and alternative health, alternative healing, so-called alternative healing, which actually is the reconnection in with healing that is deeply situated in the timeless memory of the plant medicine and the people who live in the land. It's been an interesting journey because, as we know, there's a, a great, I don't know whether it's a clash. It has been a clash. It's been an interesting process, but I don't know so much of a clashing now because as a global system, we've all merged with each other in so many ways. Um, But there are still these clashes of identities and clashes of ways of being and looking at the otherness of any of us, looking at the otherness of a city, the otherness of the people in the city, the otherness of the ways of being, the otherness of culture. And part of the work for me on an ongoing basis in the personal way, and I've never always understood it, was to go, how do we integrate? How do we transform and integrate? And of course, we all share a connection with integral thinking and Wilber's work that I think catalyzed many of us, but more so the developmental aspect of working with Wilbur himself, but also working from my own pathway of development across human consciousness and human experience and in organizations and systems. I'm giving you a bit more detail of that because in 2006 I met Susanne Cook-Greuter. And again, there was another, of course, this is this feeling of something more beyond the conventional. There is something that we keep getting pulled back into, and it serves us very, very well. Like we have to know how a laptop works. We have to know all the technologies of the modern world. And yet we are missing the technologies of the more ancient world that have also been there and living with us side by side. So Suzanne and I have worked together for a long time, and I did have a conversation with her last night to talk about her at her later stage of development. She is now 80. Um, and we beautifully taught in different countries around the world and talked about how cultures impress on this developmental landscape. What was so interesting from the conversation with her, um, before I move into that, I just want to close a loop around Dumi and my work, is around bringing the Western, and I'll loop back to it, bringing the Western kind of overlay of the single story that has been the West, to immerse it with all the multiple stories that is all of us sitting here and our own heritage. And thank you beautifully for that connection to our ancestors, Nicole. You know, who were those ancestors that we bring forward? And part of the work that we've been involved in our school and in the organizational work is bringing the African principles, the collective foreground into the individualism. It's not that us as Westerners or honing and striving for individual success or individual growth don't have it. But there's such a powerful process, and to me, I hope you'll talk to it, of the collective being so present in so many ways. A simple story, I have a black gardener from the Eastern Cape which is a fairly poor and badly run area with such vital wonderful terrain and wonderful scenery and wonderful people. And a lot of the habits of the Eastern Cape with this special kind of lineage of Xhosa are moving into the Western Cape, which as its heritage was the San and the Khoisan and the earlier peoples who were based right on the south. So we have this influx of various tribes into a city and urban area that is trying to cope with the influx of trying to fit in all these different needs and seeing the poverty and when I say poverty, it is in wealth, but the poverty of the environments where they're not stimulating this beautiful connection back to the earth. And again, Demi and I have worked with Integral Africa in trying to get the Western process of the Western mindset of rational linear thinking into a process-driven feminine aspect of transferring that um, knowledge center and honoring the masculine linear and the agency there, and working with actually something is missing in the territory of some of the models that we have and the technologies we have of the modern world. And that is this ease and the flow and the stilling that we felt as Nicole came in and brought us back to ourselves. That is the echo of the land and the soul working with us. So how do we bring that in to working with executives, working with leaders, city leaders, leaders of universities. All of these has been a huge concern for, and in the conversations that we've had with Susanne over years. She is feisty, she is fiery, she is wonderful. I have seen her separate two grown big men in their wonderful indignation of butting heads with each other like bucks on the grasslands of um, our South African landscape. And she has got up onto a chair in between them and separated them. And this locking horns is something that I think we come together in all the time, where we come into this adversarial space all the time. And what does it take in the feminine to actually hold the fiery aggression of the negative masculine playing out and the healthy side of the healthy side of the feminine, because the negative feminine is not so pretty either. So I've seen this work of partnering with Susanne, whose science mind and access to language and the deep kind of considerations of language. And part of what we talked about last night was how curiosity is really what has driven her as a purpose into her life, to find out where can we go beyond, what are the edges that we can go beyond, which led her to discovering the post-conventional stages. Now, interestingly enough, as we're working with an AI form of leadership maturity, which has been beautifully done by not necessarily in partnership on their own, but work with Susanne by two students of ours. We've come to see that at first, in the AI form, we could not get past simply getting the results of a profile into the conventional outcomes where it was valid and viable and statistically proven. But with more work and more kind of nuance of training this big language system, we're getting the responses of going into the post-conventional space. But what is so interesting, that as we are moving into this research, we're seeing responses from the African continent coming up with the use of much more we than I. We are seeing that somehow, though, as we were going up a trajectory, when I say up a trajectory, oh, that is a language model that is so entrenched up and down. So as we're going through the arc of this letting go the conventional mind and opening into more of what is, she discovered this process and worked with the big egg, the kind of process of the egg expansion of moving along consciousness, what gives birth to greater consciousness as we move in a trajectory. And it was intuition. It was intuition for her that was felt at a very early age, where she said she remembers in high school talking about or asking the question of what is wisdom. And that has been a pursuit of what is wisdom? Where do we find meaning? Where do we find consciousness? And the connection with this AI language model is now that we can track that arc scientifically, proven in the touching visual process of being able to see that there is expanded capacities that we have, but we've talked about going back to what I think Gebser talks about in the ground of being. How do we actually reconnect our soul back into the ground of being and our essence? What does this have to do with the soul of the city? I think everything. Yesterday morning, not yesterday, on Monday, no, Tuesday. Whoops, is yesterday. Um, the the gardener that works for me, works with me, is from the Eastern Cape. There's the link, and he is living here with a home in the Eastern Cape and living in a shack, a very nice shack, but a shack nonetheless in one of our townships in a city area on the other side of our mountain. And my daughter's mother-in-law, sorry, personal stories. My daughter's mother-in-law needed help in the garden because they have an elderly man who's not well. They don't want to retrench him or anything. They just want some help in the gardening and support of their house. So I said, well, Sandela could actually help. But what was so prominent for me is when he came to my house and she came and I introduced them to each other, was the profound humility of the greeting from this 40-year-old man who greeted this woman. My heart wanted to burst. He bent over with what I can only say is not a less than, and it's misinterpreted, as a deep bow. And Nicole, I'm going to bring in again, you asked us to bow. With a deep bow of living humility that made me notice that moment in time and again go, Dumi, you're going to be speaking to this of Ubuntu and of this ability to see each other, really see each other. So how do we create those moments? How do we create the moments when you're rushing in? And I was very conscious today of the rushing down, getting my laptop. We put into a new laptop that downloaded, and some of the things are missing. And staying in equanimity and staying connected and staying trusting that there is a group of people here who can hold the conversation. And yes, we are doing wonderful things on this side of the world, and we're contributing to what you're doing. And as long as we keep doing that, I think we're going to make those connections that are the mycelium roots and are coming back to our center, our soul.